Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews has been giving an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisors, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 11 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show today. We're meeting with franchise author and franchise expert and the president of Franchise Beacon, Michael Peterson. And whether you're looking to start or grow an existing franchise, Franchise Beacon offers the expertise and services that can help guide your franchise business to success. And we're going to talk to Michael about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we have a great show.
The Stone Coat Franchise Opportunity. Are you looking for a unique and lucrative franchise opportunity? If so, take a look at Stone Coat. With a patented process which creates a true stone finish on almost any wall or ceiling, Stone Coat is a true game-changing product in the multi-billion-dollar construction industry. Stone Coat is applied faster, cleaner, and cheaper than conventional quarried stone, which saves both time and money. With advantages in remodel and new construction of both residential and commercial projects, Stone Coat is a true crossover product. The Stone Coat franchise opportunity provides a low startup cost, low operating expenses, comprehensive training, ongoing support, and no royalty payments. For more information on the Stone Coat franchise opportunity, go to www.stonecoatfranchise.com. That's www.stonecoatfranchise.com, or call us at 972-380-2700. That's 972-380-2700.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 11 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show today. We're meeting with franchise author, franchise expert, and the president of Franchise Beacon, Michael Peterson. And whether you're looking to start a franchise or grow an existing franchise, Franchise Beacon offers the expertise and services that can help guide your franchise business to success. Hi, Michael. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Marty. How's everything today?
Everything's going well, Michael. It's great to finally have you on the show. We always like to ask our guests, Michael, where are you calling from today?
Sure. Great question. Well, I think I told you before, I've kind of lived all around the world in 12 states and 3 countries. I spent a year recently in the beautiful city of Cali, Colombia. But a year ago, like this week, I came back stateside, and I landed in Dallas. I have 2 franchisors that I represent here. And so I came here to be closer to them and talking to you from sunny Irving, Texas right now in the DFW marketplace.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's actually a beautiful day here, too, in Pennsylvania, Michael. We had such a long winter here, so it finally feels like spring, or actually almost summer. We're ready for the air conditioner already, so that's fantastic. So before we even get into franchising, Michael, I mean, you have, in studying your background, you have a pretty heavy background in entrepreneurship, right? You want to talk a little bit about that? Sure,
I do. And it's actually, it really helps when I talk to new or prospective franchisees or franchisors that I do have a pretty heavy background in entrepreneurship. I've kind of done what other people are considering doing. So I had my first real business, if you will, when I was 17. I was a partner in a sales organization. We had 3 offices throughout the state of Montana. I did 3-year stint in the Army, but other than that, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life.
great. It's it sounds so young now too, doesn't it? I'm like, I don't know to you, but 17. I said, God, it sounds like what a young age. I just hit my 50th birthday, So it sounds like you say, God, 17 years old. When I was looking at that, I said, that's amazing. It's just such a young age. So I think that's fantastic. So. In looking at your background, over the last 12 years or so, Michael, through, franchising has really been your thing. And you have a book out. It's called How and Why to Franchise Your Business. And you teach about franchise development through a couple of large franchise associations, the IFA, IFPG, which I'm very familiar with. And you write a lot about franchising. It's obviously become your passion. So how did you first get involved in the industry then?
Sure. And you're right. It is an industry I'm very passionate about. I actually kind of dipped my toe into it in 2005. Okay. My business partner, Charles Franklin, and I were running a marketing company, and one of our clients was a windshield replacement company based out of Phoenix.
Right.
And they were relying on us for a lot of things, and they wanted to check out this franchising thing. So Charles had been a franchisee years before in the wireless cell phone stores. And that was kind of the extent of our knowledge, but we started digging and researching and helping put together an offering. And then we actually, through some contacts of Charles, we introduced them to their first franchisee, which did not turn out how most franchisors normally do. The franchisee bottomed out. So they had one franchisee, and then they became the largest windshield replacement, or second largest in the country, and didn't franchise.
Wow.
About 2 years later is when I really, got involved in franchising. Charles and I were asked to start up head up the franchise development of what it then was a startup company called Play and Trade Video Games, and really launch their franchise side. And the franchisor actually ran by the same team that Charles was a franchisee with 10 years ago, or 10 years prior to that. So we jumped into it.
That's fantastic. So Play and Trade, they I remember that. They got pretty big. I remember seeing them all over the place, Michael. We've been doing the show now 11 years. So, right before the big recession hit. So it seemed like you guys were growing like crazy. Would you say that's accurate? And how did all of that happen?
The crazy is the right word. Honestly, the growth was unprecedented. We were based in Orange County, California. In 2006, we had 4 stores open. In 2008, we were listed as the fastest growing company in Orange County with revenues at $7 million and 2,000% year-over-year growth. Just to put a little perspective on that same year, Vizio was number 4 as the fastest growing companies in Orange County, and they'd been number 2 the previous year. So we were growing like crazy. We opened on average a location every day for about 400 days. So we got a lot of stores open. And then, the recession hit. Unfortunately for us, the timing was worse than most because at the exact same time, the video games went from the console to the cell phone, right? That's about when Angry Birds came out, if you remember that.
Of course.
And so all of a sudden, video games went from, your TV to your pocket. And so it was like a recession inside of a recession.
Yeah, that's something. So you told me before, Michael, that that was when you actually moved out of franchise sales, and then you moved into franchise legal. And, that seems like an interesting move. You have actually held a lot of different positions in franchising. Maybe you could quickly talk about, the various roles that you've held in franchising.
Sure. It was an interesting move. It was a necessary one. I had zero background in legal, but the company was going through some legal problems and needed a business mind, not a legal mind there. So I spent about a year as the legal liaison for Play and Trade, took care of some legal issues they were having with the state of California and some franchisees. And then I went from there and took over the franchise support department. Shortly after that, we merged that department with training, and I was heading up training and support for new and existing franchises. And then, eventually I was basically running the company. I was the chief administrative officer, oversaw the day-to-day functions of the organization. So that was my career, there at Play and Trade. And then Charles, who was still with the company at the time, in fact, he was the chief development officer. In 2013, we decided to focus on this little side business that we had been running called Franchise Beacon full-time.
Right.
And then as the president of Franchise Beacon, I've worked with small companies, launching them into the franchise space. I've worked with large franchisors, helping them bring their recruitments kind of next level. We've designed and implemented training programs, written FDDs, and all that stuff.
That's fantastic. But
I have stayed franchise sales the whole time. I've also focused on franchise sales the whole time, so it's always been kind of my passion.
Right. That's fantastic. So, you mainly work with franchisors, but for our franchisee audience, Michael, we call them aspiring franchipreneurs. You can really bring a different perspective because it sounds like, you've looked at franchising from literally every angle. So what advice would you give our listeners that are thinking of becoming franchisees? Yeah,
and so what's interesting is, the advice that I would give to a prospective or new franchisee, a prospective franchipreneur, is the same advice that I would give to prospective or new franchisors. There's just a ton of crossover.
How so, Michael? Like in what way?
Yeah, let me give you a few examples. I tell franchisors to be really careful about awarding franchisees to individuals that are so passionate about the business model that they don't ask the right questions. Right? As somebody who ran a video game franchisor, I saw firsthand, those are some really passionate people. And what happens when somebody's so passionate about the industry or product as a consumer that they don't do their due diligence as an owner. Now, nothing that I do or say is going to convince someone to get into a business that they find boring, and I don't want to. But don't get so fired up about the business model or the industry or the growth that you don't, look under the hood. Another example is when I'm working with a franchise prospect, I make sure that the franchisor gets comfortable with all of the players. I've ran into situations in the past where there was a silent investor, and I'm using air quotes here, in a franchise that ended up calling all the shots. Unfortunately, that person hadn't gone through training and didn't really have goals that were aligned with the franchisor. They wouldn't have been approved, honestly, and the one I'm thinking of wouldn't have been approved as a franchisee. That same advice stands for a prospective franchisee. When you're looking at a franchise, don't just talk to me. Don't just talk to the development team. And it's not because franchise salespeople are dishonest. By and large, they're not. You can't survive in this business without a super high level of integrity. But franchise development people are often disconnected, from the day-to-day ops of the franchise. And especially when you're looking at a large franchisor, make sure that you speak with all the players, the people in charge of training, people in charge of support, finance, real estate, everything that's going to impact your business. Now, one of the franchises I work with, Building Kids, is a preschool, and in that case, all of those hats are worn mainly by three people. So if you're working with a young franchisor, you might be talking to the same person, and that's fine. But just make sure you're spending time with the people that you're going to be interacting with for the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, because that's a long time, isn't it, Michael? 10, 20 years. It's a long commitment. I like how you mentioned, to look under the hood. I think that's such a great analogy, for buying a franchise. One of the questions I get all the time, because I've been doing this show now, it's going to be 12 years in November, Michael. I always get the question, what's the best franchise to buy right now? How do you typically answer that question?
Yes, I'm sure over 12 years you've heard that a lot, and there's always that hot thing on the market, right? Whether it's yogurt or cell phones or whatever it is. And it's tempting, of course, for me to answer by mentioning one of my brands. But the fact is there is no such thing. Something I realized in my play and trade days is that, and I say these words now to every prospective franchisee and franchisor, there is no perfect franchisor. There's no perfect franchisee. What we're looking for is to get as close as we can to the perfect match.
And how does one go about finding that perfect match, Michael?
Lots of due diligence. And again, what I'm going to tell you is the other side of what I would tell a franchisor, kind of the other side of the coin. It actually amazes me how many franchisors bring in a franchisee that they feel is the right fit, but they haven't quantified why they feel that and what the needs are from that franchisee. So I tell a young franchisor, first figure out who won't work in your business, or who who you don't want to work with. Maybe that's someone with no sales background, or maybe it's someone with only a sales background. Or someone with too much or too little executive experience or something like that. So the reverse side of that for a prospective franchisee is first decide what you don't want to do. Now, that might be your day-to-day life. It might be the industry. It might be the size of the franchisor. Maybe you don't want to sell. Maybe you don't want to have a ton of employees. Maybe you don't want to work from home. I love working from home, by the way, but some people don't. Maybe you don't want to be in an industry that's heavily regulated or, exceptionally, has a lot of disruptors, or maybe you don't want to serve alcohol. There's so many different things you could say, don't want to do this.
Right.
And then next thing I would tell a franchisor is decide what you have to have. Things like net worth, background, education. For a franchisee, it's decide what you're able to do, based on your financing ability. If you want to go full time, do you want to keep your job? How long can you afford to go without an income? Are you comfortable relocating? One of the brands I work with requires actually not one but 2 relocations. Are you comfortable with relocation? And then finally, and I got to stress this should be the last step. What do you want to do? What passions are in your life? What passions in your business do you have? What type of work-life balance is important to you? And what role do you want to play within your business? And if you start kind of with that exercise, you'll be ready to start looking at franchisors really knowing what you're looking for, and just instead of just poking at them and saying, wonder if this looks like a good fit for me.
That's a great, I've never heard that, in all the 12 years I've been doing the show, Michael, is to look at it from the reverse side, it's really actually, it's very clever, what don't you want to do, because, for years in doing the show, a lot of the advice is, okay, what do you want to do? But I think that really helps the process, doesn't it, by saying, okay, what don't you want to do? I think that's I think it makes it a little bit easier, almost in like finding that right match, so I think that's fantastic. So what's on your radar right now, Michael? I mean, what are some exciting spaces in the franchising industry?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And forgive me, there's a truck driving by my office, so sorry, I just got loud. There's a few obvious ones, right? Senior care is an industry that's growing and is going to continue to grow for decades. 10,000 people a day hit 65 years of age. Yeah. We've all got to eat. So food isn't going anywhere, and in fact, it's getting more segmented, which allows more businesses to enter. So you think about pizza. 15 years ago, there was pizza. Now there's like 6 different types of pizza franchises, and each one of them, have really strong growth potential. But for me, there's actually 2 things that are really on my radar personally, and that's early education and experience-based franchising. Yeah. The last 10 years or so, this economy has changed a lot to an experience-based economy. I personally think that has to do with the fact that we document our whole lives now on social media. So you always want something to share, right? So that's why you see a franchisor like Rock and Jump. I don't know if you've heard of them, indoor.
Sure, I've heard of them, yeah. Yes, I have.
Okay. Or, to get a little more on the adult side, Pino's Palette. A place where you drink wine and have an art class, right? They're growing exponentially because they're delivering an experience. And by the way, I have nothing to do with either of those 2 brands. But I recently, about 6 months ago, started representing a brand called Game Truck, which is a mobile arcade franchise. And I was super excited about that because people are spending so much more of their disposable income on experiences and memories. Yeah. So that's one thing. Experiential is huge, and then the other one is children. As we become more of a global economy, we're starting to realize that we are way behind in this. The U.S. is 27th in the world in early childhood education. So Building Kids franchise, when I met them, which was just as they were launching their franchise, I was really excited to start talking to them. They're a preschool franchise. They've been around since 2015. Their growth has been phenomenal. All their schools have waiting lists. And I believe that's because there's a huge unmet demand in that market. So, and it doesn't have to be preschool. Tutoring, anything that's really impacting that early type of childhood education, I think, is not going anywhere. Yeah, I would agree with all those industries and the ideas that you suggested, Michael. Those I think are great industries and franchises. Well, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Michael, is you and I have been doing this a long time now. I got into franchising, I guess it was back in like 1999, and so there have been a lot of changes, over the last like 18, 20 years. But what is the current state of franchising, Ben? What's the health of the franchise industry in 2018? I don't have a 20-year lens. I don't have quite that long, but I've been in the business a little over 10 years. But to me, right now is a really exciting time. I do a lot of franchise shows. Every franchise show I attend, I see new brands. And then I see them coming back the next year, which is awesome. So not just coming and going. And I see new concepts. I walk the halls of these franchise shows, and I look around, and I'm like, I never would have thought that would be a franchise.
Yeah.
And then you see them next year, and they're like, we have 200 franchisees. So it's really an exciting time. Just some real numbers, and I kind of keep these at my fingertips. In 2016, franchising was accounted for 13.2 million jobs. $1.6 trillion in economic output, and it was 5.8% of our GDP. So I love the industry. I think it's a great time to be in it on either side of the coin, either as a franchisee or franchisor or as a franchise consultant.
Yeah, it's interesting in going to the shows, Michael. I've always had the same experience. I'm always surprised at some of the industries that pop into franchising, but then you say, why not? And then again, you're right. You see them come back the next year, and you say, you know what? I think there is something here. So maybe we can talk a little bit about Franchise Beacon. I mean, the book, and what's next for Michael Peterson.
I'm going to tell you a funny story real quick before I do, though, based on what you just said. I had this idea one time I saw a breathalyzer in a bar. It was supposedly a game. And I'm like, that would be a cool franchise. I'd just been doing franchising about 6 months. And the idea went away. 3 years later, I saw one at the franchise show in New York. And then the next year I saw him again. And then I saw him again the next year as one of I think they're one of the top 20 fastest growing franchises in the country. So literally you can franchise anything. And if you got the right business model, it will work. So Franchise Beacon. Our primary thing is we help make franchisors. To become a franchisor is expensive, and we try to make sure that the business owner understands what it takes to become a successful franchisor, and then if they have what it takes, we want to guide them to get there. So we work with them to get the FDD done. We design a marketing plan, advertising materials, and then for most of our brands, we handle the entire franchise recruitment process. Now, for other brands, we also just do that. Just franchise recruitment.
Right.
The book, How and Why to Franchise Your Business, is a quick, easy read. It's almost as quick as I just said it. It's 120 pages. I wrote it because I felt like there was something missing in franchise literature. There's a ton of franchise books out there. There's really good ones. I happen to count a few of the authors as personal friends. But one of the things I felt was missing was some serious actionable items. So not only do I walk through the process of becoming a franchisor, but you've got real numbers in there, like, what should you look at for cost per lead, for cost per sale. I've got sample budgets ranging from a couple of $1,000s a month to a few $100,000 a year. And, I have the unique experience of having managed a $2,000 a month franchise recruitment budget and having managed a $500,000 a year franchise recruitment budget. Believe it or not, the book actually even has scripts. So for that initial call, what do you say in the first 90 seconds? I've got it scripted out in there for you to look at. And then to your last question, what's next for Michael Peterson? I actually have a few exciting things going on. Franchise Beacon is and probably will, for the foreseeable future, remain my main focus. We're developing some very strong brands, but I'm also working on my next book. Which is going to be called 20 Questions Every New Franchisor Asks. Developing a lot of content. Right now I'm in the middle of writing what's called the Ultimate Franchise Sales Guide, which is probably going to be a free ebook. And so working on some collaborations with some industry leaders on both of those. And finally, I'm working with a close friend of mine, Brian Birnbaum. One of the companies that I moved here to Dallas to represent was a company called Liquid Capital, and Brian was the founder and president of that company, just retired last week. They're very large in the franchising business, multinational, 100 franchisees. So we're launching a new company in the franchise services space. It's called Global Franchise Services Corp. It's going to provide non-traditional working capital and growth funding for franchisees. So I don't want to say it's easy, but it's not super hard to get funding for a startup franchise. But once you're open, it can be super challenging in those first couple of years to manage cash flow. So that's what we're going to be concentrating on. Brian's been in the space for over 40 years in financing and then in the franchise space for 20. And so I'm stoked to be working with Brian. Again, over the last 4 years, we've become friends, and I consider him a mentor, and his experience is amazing. And so I'm excited to be working with him on that So that's kind of the next thing on my radar.
If I can guess, I mean, you're probably going to be doing this. I imagine, Michael. It seems like the rest of your career. I mean, it's franchising that you just enjoy. This is your passion. I could see you, have you and I having a conversation 20 years from today, and we'll probably still be talking about franchising, won't we?
I don't see myself leaving this industry. I didn't understand this industry until I started into it. But now that I see the potential in it over the last 12 years, I can't imagine myself going anywhere else. And I've kind of made I've kind of studied every facet of it, so I'd hate to put that knowledge to bed. So, yeah, I think I'm here for a while.
Right. It's such a great service, too, that you provide, Michael, because, we've had a lot of, newer concepts on the show over the last 12 years, and, I can see, a lot of them, they just don't know where to begin, you know what I mean? And they really need a service like yourself. A lot of times, you'll have a great business, whether it's Tony's Pizzeria, and they realize that they can duplicate the concept all throughout the States. But, franchising is just such a different animal, isn't it? To leave it up to the founder of the company, it's very difficult to do on your own, isn't it?
It is, and what a lot of potential franchisors do, first thing is they go to an attorney, right? And I have some really strong friends in the franchise attorney space, but they're attorneys, right? They're guiding you on the legal side, and so to have somebody that can answer questions on the business side as a young franchisor is huge. And I will plug this, by the way, real quick. I do work with a few very select franchisors as their actual consultant, but I also do a lot of free training. So anybody, I love to be there for young franchisors. Just to, hey, Mike, I got a quick question. What should we do about this? It's something that's missing in the industry, or not. There's definitely a gap there, and I love to fill that when I can.
That's terrific. What's the best way, Michael, for our listeners to get more information on everything you do, the book, the services? Are there a couple of websites that they can go to get more information?
Yeah, so, starting point is Franchise Beacon, right? www.franchisebeacon.com. Beacon is spelled like a lighthouse. If you Google Michael Peterson and franchising, you'll find a ton of stuff. Make sure you put the word franchising in. I didn't kill my wife, and I'm not a country singer, and those are the two most popular Michael Petersons. But if you throw the word franchising behind it, you'll find me, my LinkedIn and my Facebook and my website and all that good stuff.
That's fantastic. Well, I really enjoyed
Franchise Beacon as well.
Okay, that's fantastic. I really enjoyed having you on this show, Michael, and I'm going to have to invite you back because I have more questions for you, as you continue to grow. And again, you're going to be doing this a long time. We're hoping to do the podcast another 10 years. So it's great to have you on the show today.
Marty, I appreciate the time and I appreciate the opportunity, and let's do it again.
You got it, Michael. We'll be right back with more franchise interviews.
Coming up on segment 2, you're going to hear what every franchipreneur needs to know before buying a franchise. We're going to play a clip from our popular Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews.
Are you looking for a franchise that delivers? Businesses will always need shipping, and for more than 25 years, loyal customers have depended on Unishippers for reliable savings and exceptional customer service. Unishippers is focused on just one thing: helping small and medium-sized businesses save time and money on all their shipping needs. And as the largest reseller of complete shipping services in the country, we have the buying power to ensure that we succeed. The Unishippers franchise offers low startup costs, no equipment or real estate required because they're not retail, residual income, and a quality of life and work-life balance. For more information on becoming a Unishippers franchisee, go to www.unishippers.com and click Franchise Opportunities, or call Franchise Development at 801-708-5822. That's 801-708-5822. Franchisers, are you looking to reach aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise? Are you looking to reach a highly educated audience on franchising? For over 8 years, Franchise Interviews has been giving an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising. our weekly franchise radio show where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisors, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts and attorneys, and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919. That's 610-905-2919.
Today's Great Quote in Franchising is being brought to you by
Franchise Teacher.
Would you like to know how to franchise your concept or grow your franchise business?
Meet the experts at Franchise Teacher.
The goal of Franchise Teacher is to teach, coach, consult, and advise. The team of experts at Franchise Teacher will evaluate your business model and present you with a winning business strategy.
Franchise Teacher will help you decide whether or not your concept works and if it's franchisable. Franchise Teacher is proud to have over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors.
Franchise Teacher are developers of over a dozen franchise systems, which include brick and mortar as well as home-based concepts of nearly 3,000 combined franchise locations.
Whether you need to add more units or get more customers, Franchise Teacher can help. We will teach.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn our proven system.
Coach.
Franchise Teacher will help you provide a game plan to succeed.
Consult.
Franchise Teacher will make sure you stay on track.
And advise.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn from our over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors. Take advantage of our free, no-obligation phone consultation. Simply go to franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
That's franchiseteacher.com. Or call us at 561-385-3032.
Hi everyone, this is Marty McDermott, the president of Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. You know, we've been hosting Franchise Interviews many years now, and during that time we've had some incredible quotes on our show. Today you're going to get to hear from Nick Friedman, who is the founder of College Hunks Hauling and Junk and Moving Franchise Opportunity. And Nick said something really quite brilliant on our show that we haven't heard in over a decade of doing franchise interviews. We started speaking about the 4 F's of franchising, and interesting enough, we ended up with 5 F's of franchising as we were doing the interview with Nick. And, you know, in marketing, we talk about the 4 P's of marketing, which is product, price, promotion, and place. So I thought this was really brilliant what Nick said. So here we go with Nick Friedman, the founder of College Hunks Hauling and Junk Moving Franchise Opportunity.
History.
What, you know, the majority of our listeners, we call them, Nick, we call them aspiring franchipreneurs. What types of characteristics do you look for in your franchisees?
You know, what I like to say is there's 4 F's when considering a franchise, which is also, I guess, starts with a letter F. So, you know, there's 4 F's that come out of franchise. And I think this is what a prospective franchise should think of when they're considering what franchise they want to pursue. And this is, quite frankly, I think what franchisors should consider when they're evaluating a prospective franchisee. So the first F is fit. You know, do they fit? In other words, do they have transferable skills that can make them effective at this business? Have they done anything in their prior professional or personal lives that would make them be successful in this type of business? The second piece is the family side. In other words, does their family support them in them pursuing this endeavor, whether it's their husband or wife or kids or parents? You know, do they believe in them? Because you don't want things to get tough in their inner circle to say, I told you so. You want them to, you know, kind of cheer them on to get through it. The financial piece is important. In other words, are they capitalized to be able to invest in the opportunity, and do they have realistic financial expectations? And then the last F is the fun factor. You know, can we have fun working with this individual? You know, franchising is very much like a partnership, even though that's not typically called that. You got to have, you know, an alignment of vision and values to be able to enjoy working together. So that's really what we look for. You know, we want people that believe in the secret sauce that we've already developed. We don't want somebody to come tell us that they think it should be done differently. We want them to tell us that they believe in what we've created. And sure, we would, want to continuously improve and encourage ideas, but not, we want folks that believe in the system and are going to execute the system rather than trying to shortcut success by doing it their own way. And I think that's, really no different in our system than any other franchise model that is going to be successful long term. They need to really take into account those factors.
That's great, Nick. We have this great quotes and franchising podcast. Anytime we hear, Michael Gerber's been in there a couple of times, but we're going to put that one in there because I haven't heard that in over a decade, and I think that's great advice to our listeners. It's really fantastic because it's true. I mean, you could really, your business, you could teach to anybody, couldn't you? I mean, pretty much, but it's interesting in putting those factors in there, like family support, and even fun. I haven't heard that, but it should be an enjoyable business. And, because it is a stressful situation for the customers, I guess you got to be able to put a smile on your customer's face, don't you?
Absolutely. And I mean, as you know, there's over 3,000 franchise opportunities out there. So, what's going to separate one from the other? It's got to be something that you can enjoy. And I guess I'll grab another F out of there. I'm on a roll here. Fulfillment. Is it something that, we're going to be fulfilled doing day in and day out? Because I think franchising is a lot like a gym membership. If you join a gym and you've got fitness goals, you're getting access to all types of equipment, personal trainers, coaches, workout groups, but you still got to go and show up and do the work. So if you buy a franchise, you're getting access to the business model in a box. You're getting access to trainers, coaches, fellow franchisees that you can, hold each other accountable with, but you still got to show up and put in the effort to execute that business model. So that's where I think those factors come into play.
Once you decide that, you do like them, and they like you, Nick, and there is a fit, what is the training like? I mean, do they typically come to Florida for training? How does that work? If you'd like to hear that whole interview with Nick Freeman of the College Hunks Hauling and Junk Moving franchise opportunity, all you have to do is go to franchiseinterviews.com, go to our franchise interviews by category page, and then go to our home repair and improvements page, and you'll be able to listen to that whole show with Nick Freeman. It was really a fantastic interview. It was great to finally have Nick on the show. And lastly, we'd just like to thank everyone for making this podcast such a big hit. It's hard to imagine. We've been doing it now over 10 years, and it's just amazing to see where the podcast has gone. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you again soon with another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, sponsored by Franchise Interviews. Take care, everyone.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.